Welcome, everybody, to Soccer 101. My name is Taylor Rockwell. Always good to start off the show by hitting my microphone. I hope that hasn't dissuaded you from listening, because today we're talking about South Korean football. We are continuing our series on teams that have qualified for the 2026 World Cup by looking at domestic soccer in that country. And today, Graham Ruthven, we're talking the People's Republic of Korea. I believe they do not like to be called South Korea, but we'll give them that level of billing first.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the K-League, and I'm genuinely looking forward to this episode because the K-League is a league that it's genuinely a league I've thought previously I should try and get into more. Like, see, the J-League, I have like a surface level knowledge of the J-League and who's near the top of the table at any given time. The K-League, I don't normally have that knowledge, but it seems like a cool league. Like, I've done a couple of newsletter stories on it in the past, and yeah, it just seems cool. So if Sky want to pick up the UK rights, or if Mark Goldbridge can find the money for another league's rights, yeah, I'd be down for that.
Yeah, if you're listening to this not the week of August 20th, 2025, the news is that in England, if you want to watch the Bundesliga, you're now going to YouTube, correct, Graham?
In the UK, yeah, the world is wide. Wild, excuse me. Yeah, Mark Goldbridge. The face of the Bundesliga at the UK.
I imagine the changing in broadcast and streaming rights is a later 101 episode. For now, Let's focus on the K-League, the longest, oldest professional football league in Asian football, established in 1983, but has gone through some changes, Graham, to put it mildly.
Yeah, so just first of all, a quick outline of why we're doing this episode, because there will be listeners who know why we're doing these deep dives into leagues, but if maybe some people aren't familiar, we are basically doing a series of looking at the domestic game of teams that have qualified for the 2026 World Cup. So we've done Iran and Japan and Uzbekistan and a few others, and seeing as South Korea qualified in June, and we figured that this was up next, and they qualified very comfortably from a group that included Jordan and Oman and Iraq, Palestine and Kuwait. Finished top of their group unbeaten, and it's a team that is generally competitive at World Cups. They tend to qualify, and the K-League is regarded as one of the stronger leagues in Asia. Or if we're being pedantic, Taylor, it's K-League 1, and then there's also K-League 2 as well. K-League 1 is the top domestic division in South Korean football, and that's like the brand name, K-League, which I always like that as a name. I like the J-League as a name as well. It has previously been called the Korean Super League and the Korean Professional Football League. The K-League name dates back to 1998, when South Korea was gearing up for co-hosting the 2002 World Cup with Japan at the time. And the K-League, or whatever it's been called, the top division in South Korea, goes back quite a distance. Until the 1980s, though, it was semi-professional. It was a semi-professional setup, and it wasn't until 1983 that a professional division was set up. And that I was reading that was partly inspired by a professional baseball league starting up around the
basketball
same,
too, I think.
Yeah. So baseball, I was reading, apparently baseball is still the most popular sport in Korea, but pretty close behind is football. And really, since the 2002 World Cup, that was a real catalyst for the sport. There's been kind of growing interest. It has been gradual and incremental, but I think there's still a sense that the sport is growing. The first league season of the K-League, or what was it called back then, the Korean Super League, was 5 teams. Only 2 of them professional. 3 other teams semi-professional. From then on, it kind of expanded by the following season. It was 8 teams, and then by the time it becomes the K-League in 1998, it's 10 teams. At present, it's 12 teams. Format is pretty straightforward. Well, it's straightforward. It's straightforward for me as a Scot, so we'll come on to that. The team that finishes top is the winner. Team that finishes bottom gets relegated, and then the 11th and 10th place teams go into a relegation playoff. There is a split for the final 5 games of the season. This is where my Scottish football background helps me, because this is what we do with the Scottish Premiership. So each team faces each other 3 times in the season. Then the table splits for the final round of fixtures, and the top 6 play each other and the bottom 6 play each other, and that's how you get your final round of fixtures. So you're welcome, South Korea, for that format idea. Scotland will. Actually, it could have been them that inspired us. I don't actually know.
When they do that, I should know this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Like, points are the same, right? It's just that now you have a greater opportunity to play against the stronger teams to maybe close some ground or make up some ground or increase your margin of victory.
So I quite like it for that fact that the season finishes where you're playing teams of your own quality. Where there is a weird quirk is, if you think about the two, basically what happens is it splits into two tables, right? So there's like a championship and a relegation half of the table. If you finish top of the relegation half of the table, you will more often than not have more points than the team that finishes bottom of the top half. So the team that technically finishes 7th can finish with more points than the team that finishes 6th. That's a bit weird, but other than that, I do quite like it.
And then is it 10th plays 11th, right? And then the loser of that, they're then playing the winner of the playoff from the second division, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Which itself is 4 teams, the winner of that one then playing the loser of the relegation playoff. So it's basically somewhat tricky to get promoted into that top flight, but I think like intentionally so, because you only have the 12 teams in the top flight. At least those 12 teams are somewhat spread around the country, which was not always the case, Mr. Ruffin. Let's talk decentralization, shall we? Because I think that is one of the more interesting and important parts of Korean football history.
Yeah, totally. So this was this sort of program they had prior to the 2002 World Cup, which I think was the most fascinating period in K-League history, because we all know how FIFA pushes for host nations to grow their domestic game around this time. They did the same with MLS, obviously, before the 94 World Cup. But the K-League had, or Korean football had, this decentralization plan where they shifted a number of Seoul-based clubs around the country to try and grow soccer in other areas. So Yukong Elephants, LG Cheetah, Lucky Goldberg Cheetahs, you'll never guess who owns that club, and Ilwa Chumwa were moved to new cities. Wasn't very successful, I don't think, because all those clubs were moved back to Seoul after a few seasons. What is interesting is that while in the 90s there was this concern about there being too many clubs based in Seoul, there's actually only one Seoul-based team in the K-League at the moment, FC Seoul. There's actually not a city
who were one of the ones
has...
moved, right? That was that was LG Cheetahs, who moved back in 2004 and became FC Seoul.
Yeah, so the others cleared out or have just been like relegated or whatever. There's actually not a city that has 2 teams in the K-League 1 at the moment. It's 12 teams and 12 different cities, which is quite something, and I guess gives the impression of a good spread of interest and quality across South Korea. So
it worked and didn't work?
Well, that's what I was saying. I was literally going to come on to that point. Like, did it work? It seems no, but somehow by accident they've ended up with a league that is spread across the country.
It seems possibly like hosting a World Cup maybe generated some interest, and then having a team do very well at that World Cup probably also boosted interest in the sport, generated more interest and enthusiasm. Also having giant commercial sponsors own the teams probably also helps with the growth of the game a little bit.
Yeah, that's the other thing I find fascinating about the K-League is so many of the clubs are owned by some of the biggest companies in the country. So Ulsan HD are owned by HD Hyundai Heavy Industries. FC Seoul are owned by the GS Group, which is a huge South Korean conglomerate. Pohang Steelers are, as the name suggests, owned by a giant steel company. You'll never guess, Taylor, who owns John Book Hyundai Motors. That one.
Not Hyundai Heavy Motors, but light motors.
Yeah, that was confusing to me. I think Ulsan were called Ulsan Hyundai, I think, for a long while, and I think some sort of court case made them change to HD. So, the real Hyundai have forced the ones that only make the heavy industries to change their name. Yeah, there's others. I mean, Jeju SK, the SK in their name is like a massive conglomerate. Pretty much every club is owned by a giant company. There's a couple that I think are owned by, state governments or regional governments as well. So it's interesting how they're able to combine that sort of capitalism with what seems to be a pretty organic and vivid supporter culture and football scene, and I guess in a sense it's not too far removed from what German football has managed to achieve, where obviously they have this fan representation and this vivid supporter culture, but like VW and Wolfsburg and Bayer Leverkusen are owned by Bayer, and even Bayern Munich are owned by Audi, Allianz, and who's the other one? Adidas are the 3 companies that have 50% of Bayern Munich. So that would be the comparison I'd make there.
And so if we're continuing to set the stage for people less familiar with the league, we've established the decentralization policy, the benefits and drawbacks. We've kind of given the status and the structure at present, along with the the sponsorship aspect. We should also note that it is, and we'll probably get into this at various points in this episode, a more domestic-oriented league. Most of the teams are composed primarily of Korean players, with like some then like Asian Federation players thrown in there, and then some foreign players as well. But it feels like, generally speaking, you have like 4 to 6 foreign players, and to my mind, you don't have as many like name foreign players at that.
Yeah, so I found that you're permitted to have 6 foreign players on the roster at any one time. As you say, Taylor, not a huge number of really big names at the moment. So FC Seoul have got Jesse Lingard, who is somehow still only 32 years old.
That's insane.
It is insane. They have also got New York Red Bulls legend Patrick Klimala. Besides that, I mean, there's a lot of Brazilians in the league, 33 to be precise. And if you look through, there's a Wikipedia page that kind of outlines the foreign players that are in the league at any given time. A lot of Brazilian flags in there, so 33 in the league. Gus Poyet, if we're looking at managers, is the John Book manager right now. So those would be maybe the most recognisable names to listeners. But yeah, it's a league that is largely designed to give a platform to Korean talent. It's done that very, very effectively. And if you look through, I was looking through some of the sort of historical names, so I tend to go to like top goal scorers, appearance makers, assist makers, like try and look through some of those stats for some names. Honestly, it's a lot of names that are vaguely familiar to me from like the 2002 World Cup. So Lee Dong-gook is the top goal scorer in the league, scored 228 times. You've got Ju Min-kyu, who is still playing in the league right now, but scored 82 times. Like it's very, very domestic based, and even some of the foreign names are not overly familiar to me, to be honest.
Dejan Damjanovic, that doesn't do it for you? You're not like fully immersed in his game?
I'm looking at his name right now, and Sasa Drakulic. Again, don't know if this is just a blind spot in my knowledge, but these are not names that are overly familiar to me. So.
And those are the only 2 non-Korean players in the top 10 all-time goal scorers in the league. Those 2 names we just said. Unless you are, I'm going to assume Montenegro, is that that's the flag next to his name. Or if you are Serbia, I think. Serbia and Montenegro. I don't think that's Yugoslavia next to Sasha Drakulic. But yeah, so it shows you just how like domestically oriented the teams tend to be. With that in mind, Graham, let's talk about some of those teams and some of the dominant teams at that. Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors, you mentioned them already. They, I think, have had quite the period of dominance. I think there is a contender to that dominance, but Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors winning 7 of 8 titles between 2014 and 2021. It's a decent run of form. Yeah,
and 5 of those were in a row between 2017 and 2021. They have won the most K-League titles. They've won it 9 times in their history. Ulsan HD, who listeners might remember from the Club World Cup, they were Korea's representatives at that tournament. They've won the last 3 titles. Pohang Steelers have won 6 titles in their history, although their most recent one was in 2013. Seongnam were the dominant team around the time of the 2002 World Cup, which I cannot stress just seems to have been the ultimate catalyst for Korean football around that time. I think when FIFA goes into a country, and they do this often because obviously they've got the ego of Gianni Infantino guiding them, but they like to think they're transformational and everything will be completely different after they've been in it with a World Cup, and oftentimes that's not the case. In South Korea, that seems to have been the case, and it was just a huge explosion of interest. In terms of attendances, talking of interest, FC Seoul have had the highest average home crowd over the last few years. They get over 25,000 fans at most games, which is pretty impressive. Ulsan HD are also up there around the kind of 20,000 mark. Jeonbuk get good crowds as well. They're averaging 17,000 this season. And the average among the 12 teams is 10,000 per game, which makes it the 23rd best attended league in the world. So for context, MLS is 8th. I think MLS maybe outperforms its overall quality there. That's kind of the best side of MLS. It gets 23,000 fans at games. So 10,000 per game places the K-League at around the same level as the Swedish top division and English League One. Which is decent. 10,000 per game is not bad at all.
So if they're 23rd in the world in terms of average attendance, where would you put them in the world in terms of strength of league?
So the
That's a
Opta team
tough one,
rankings
I know.
were, as usual, my first port of call. As I always do, I compared the K-League with MLS. John Book were ranked as the best K-League team when I did that, so Opta placed them 14th in MLS. FC Seoul were 26th, but with the exception of Montreal and DC United, it was pretty bottom heavy for the K-League teams. I then did a comparison with the J-League, which we obviously did not so long ago, Taylor. John Book were the 5th best team. And then after that, it was kind of mixed up, to be honest, between the J-League and the K-League team. So I think we're talking about roughly like a top 30 league in the world. And probably, when I did the comparison, probably the 3rd best league in Asia after Japan and China. I think the fourth best league. I'm forgetting the Saudi Pro League in there as well. So the 4th best league after that league. China, the Chinese Super League.
Third. I might still put them third ahead of China, but behind Korea.
So I've got
Saudi and Japan rather.
Yeah. So Japan, China, basically there's a top tier of Japan, China, Saudi Arabia, and Australia's in there as well as far as Opta is concerned. It seemed to be the case that the best K-League teams were maybe not as good as the best teams in China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia. But in terms of the general league, it was pretty comparable in terms of like the quality all the way through. So maybe it has a little bit greater depth than some of those other teams, some of those other leagues. In terms of the AFC Champions League, Pohang Steelers have won it 3 times, not since 2009 though. They did make the final in 2021. South Korean teams have actually won the AFC Champions League.
This is the thing that's confusing, right? Because like Japan, I remember being a thing where they like hadn't had as much success in the Asian Champions League. They'd had some success, but like every Korean team has won it. It seems like 5 different teams have won the Champions League, a total of 12 times,
which is
not
a
small number.
Yeah, that's the most of any Asian country. They've won it the most times. So it's Pohang, Songyam, Jeonbuk, Suwon, Samsung Blue Wings. You'll never guess who owns them. Ulsan and Busan Ipark. Yeah. They've all won it in the past. But I've mentioned this a couple times when we've been doing these episodes on the Asian leagues. The Saudi clubs are becoming more and more dominant. And last season, only 1 K-League team made the knockout rounds. So it feels like they might be. That's what I was talking about. Like the best teams are maybe getting squeezed out a little bit. Even though the league as a whole is still competitive and is still up to that level, the best teams are maybe dropping off that standard somewhat.
Yeah. I mean, and as further evidence, Ulsan, the last Korean team that is to win the Asian Champions League, that was in 2020, was their most recent victory. So you can see there, it has been a little bit of time since they had that international success because you do have so much more investment, specifically from Saudi Arabia, elsewhere as well. But you still have a competitive, I would say, like relatively strong domestic league that goes a long way towards explaining the stability and success of the Korean national team. Because I think, like with maybe certain exceptions, like certain foreign-born players, basically everybody who plays for Korea was like at some point playing for a K-League team. Even somebody like Son Heung-min playing for, I think, the FC Seoul Academy before making the move to Germany when he was like still in high school. You still have those connections along the way. And so it feels like it is still very critical in the development of the Korean national team.
Totally. And I found an article on goal.com and it projected the squad for the 2026 World Cup for South Korea. And yeah, there's some big names from European leagues in there. Son Heung-min, who you mentioned, Taylor, Hwang Hee-chan, Kang In-lee, who plays for PSG, Kim Min-jae, of course, who's at Bayern Munich. Mm-hmm. There were also 12 K-League based players in there, which is a good contingent. And that number is lower than it was back in 2002 when I think there was I went and looked at that squad. There were about 6 or 7 non-K-League players in that squad at the time. The rest of it was all K-League. But as you say, almost every one of those big-name European-based players has come through the K-League. There's a strong academy environment there. The roster rules obviously help with getting those players opportunities. And I was also reading that the mandatory military service in South Korea before the age of, I think it's 25, that might have changed to 26, it means that might be a factor in why clubs are able to hang on to players for longer, because obviously a lot of players feel that, I think Son actually, he didn't do his before the age of 25. Do you remember that one summer he had
to
to
win
go
the
back or
gold.
something?
He had to win the gold medal, otherwise he would have had to do it.
Yeah, well, actually, that's totally right. I remember that. What a bizarre scenario that was. But anyway, I think a lot of these players think, look, I'll do my mandatory military service at a younger age, and then I'll leave and maybe go to Europe. So that was something that I hadn't ever considered before, but it makes sense that these clubs would be able to hold on to these players a little bit longer because of that.
Yep. And with the current national team, it is not Jurgen Klinsmann in charge anymore, Graham. It is Hong Myung-bo is the manager, former Ulsan HD coach who was there when they won the Asian Champions League the last time, and is now, as you said, gotten Korea through qualifying at a fairly breezy pace, and that was not the case last time around. You could give some of the credit to that to the expanded format, but I do think you can kind of see a more stable hand on the wheel, more domestic talent coming through in a relatively strong domestic league leads to a cohesive, unified, and relatively strong Korea national team.
And I think stable is the word. That wasn't the word when Jurgen Klinsmann was in charge, but they moved on from that episode rather quickly. And honestly, I think we're looking at a team that's going to make it. I mean, it all depends on the draw, I guess. They could land in the group of death. But all things being equal, I think we're looking at a team that's going to make the knockout rounds again at this World Cup. Obviously, there's a round of 32 this time, which makes things slightly different. But at the last World Cup, they made the round of 16. It wouldn't surprise me if they make it as far as that again, because they have cruised through qualifying. As I say, they've kind of moved past the whole Klinsmann episode, and they're a team that has really good defensive solidity, and then they play in quick transition, which is a lot of the teams. I was reading a lot of the teams in the K-League, they see that as sort of like a Korean style of play, and a lot of teams play that way. And I think the K-League as a whole is improving gradually and incrementally, but it is improving. Attendances have grown since pre-COVID times, so that's positive. I've read some stuff on how the supporter culture stuff is getting richer, and that has made the matches more attractive. I was also reading that the TV rights money has gone up in that time since pre-COVID, which actually bucks the trend. In a lot of these Asian leagues, a lot of them have gone down, the money that they're receiving. The budgets of a lot of the teams has gone up as well, which is why we're now starting to get. I mean, look, I don't know how much value, I don't know how many tickets Jesse Lingard is selling to FC Seoul games, but I have to imagine he's one of the highest paid players in that league's history. So that might mean that over the coming years they're bringing in better foreign players. And yeah, I do think the league is now well established, and the 2002 World Cup was a catalyst for that, and maybe the next World Cup will just push it that little bit more if South Korea can make a decent run at that tournament.
Graham, in your research, viewing, whatever it may be, did you get a sense of the kind of tactical, philosophical identity of Korean League soccer? Because I think, like, holding my hands up here a little bit, we've talked, like, in other shows at length about, like, how you tend to get coded language with certain national teams, and how you have to be very mindful of how you talk about national teams. And I think so often with specifically East Asian teams, you're going to get, they're very disciplined, they're very well organized, they're very about like the collective rather than the individual. And I think that is often very much a generalized crutch when people don't know what to say. But it does seem like the commonality of approach in the K-League, especially with like middle to lower tier teams, are an emphasis on defensive discipline and physical work rate to maybe counteract a lack of technical ability.
Yep. I think that's fair, and I hopefully listeners know us well enough at this point to know that we try not to lead into stereotype and cliches. And I think when we spoke about the J-League, we were quite keen to push back on this idea of, you know, it all being about work ethic and running hard, and the Japanese league is growing exponentially from a technical point of view. And obviously the K-League has that technical grounding as well. You see the players that they're sending to Europe, they wouldn't be sending those players to the top European leagues if they didn't have that technical ability. At the same time, I think you're absolutely right, and I kind of outlined it with the way the Korean national team plays. Yep, it's kind of about staying compact and being defensively solid, and then having that threat and quick transition, and they're very, very good. And you see, they're very good at doing that, I should say. And you see that in some of the players like Song Hyun-min. What's his game based around? It's like the quick transition moments that he's best equipped in. Even someone like Kang In Lee, who plays for PSG, I think that's part part of the thing he struggled with under Lucho. He has that technical ability, but maybe doesn't have that open space to attack like he did previously in his career when he was at like Valencia coming through. So, it's a team in a league that knows what it stands for and what the identity is, and they do that very well, and they have that kind of collective identity.
Well, there we have it. So that is the K-League and K-League 2 and domestic football in the nation of Korea. We have obviously probably just scratched the surface of the history and culture of football in the country, so look forward to hearing from people who are maybe a bit more familiar with it and certainly learning more about the national team and domestic soccer as we get closer to the World Cup. For now, Graham, any other points you feel like we might not have hit or should have hit before we call this one concluded?
Just that classic football shirts need to stock some K-League jerseys, because I went looking.
Do you have any? Do you have any preferences there? Are there any leading contenders for best kids?
I'll take any. Honestly, I think it was John Book have relatively nice kids. But
I'm pulling it up now.
I was looking on classic football shirts to see if I could find any, and unfortunately no. So.
Wow.
Any
this
that
is
stand
interesting.
out to you?
Well, first of all, it's really interesting. What am I on? FootballKidArchive.com breaks it down also by maker or manufacturer and sponsor, and it feels like you've got a somewhat even distribution in terms of manufacturers. Goal Studio, we're all familiar with them, right? As the provider for two different teams, but Puma has two, Fila has two, Adidas has two. It kind of varies from there, but you don't have any betting. I think you've got finance on the shirt sponsor front. You've got energy, electronics, automotive, industrial. So that's an interesting variation. I feel like that we don't always see. Yeah, these are pretty good. As I scroll through them,
I'm now gravitating towards the Fila ones. I think just because John Book, because it's Adidas and they've kind of got the geometric shapes, that's where I sort of gravitate, because it's what I'm familiar with. That to me is coded as good shirt. But now that I look at it, the Jeju SK and the what's the other one? Gangwon. The Fila ones is. I'm feeling those.
They're all pretty good, man. They're all pretty solid across the board. Jeju have a little bit of a Wolves vibe.
They do
to me, but they're all. You're right, dude. All right, we got to get Graham some Korean League shirts, and maybe a Korean national team one just to boot, just so you're covered for 2026. For now, after we've done our open plea for Graham to get more merch, Graham Ruthven, thank you for talking all things K-League with me today, my friend.
It's always open, that plea. Thank you, Taylor Rockwell.
Indeed it is. Listeners, thank you all so much for listening and supporting. We very much appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week.